Hey there, and welcome to exercise number 86. If you want to solve this exercise on your own, then click on the link in the description. If not, keep watching and we're going to solve it together. In this one, we need to write a function named isDeepEqual that receives two objects as parameters and returns a boolean verifying if they are deeply equal or not. I didn't want to make this function super complicated, so that's why I'm putting a little restriction here saying that apart from primitive values, both parameters, so both objects, can contain nested objects, arrays, maps, or dates. So I didn't want to leave it, like entirely free, so you can put everything from regex to sets to any other data structures I can't think of right now. So I didn't want to allow it to contain everything there can be in JavaScript. So I said, okay, the objects can contain primitives, can contain other objects, can contain arrays, maps, and dates, right? That's it. Below I have an example. So I have object 1, name, VS Code, releases, this is a map, key value, and so on, type IDE. And then I have this one, and if you look at all their props, they're identical, so this one should return true. However, if you look at the second example, where we have cities, and then a name, and then the cities here, and we can see they are the same cities, but they are not in the same order. So these arrays are not, deeply equal, then this one should return false. I'm gonna go here into the right side, into the code area, and let's solve the exercise. So we're gonna need to go through all properties of object 1, right, and compare them with object 2, and actually we should also do kind of the same. So we need to verify that they contain the same props and the same number of props and so on, right? Because if object 1 is, let's say, name Bob, but object 2 is name Bob and age 22, these are not deeply equal copies. So I need to check all props of object 1 with object 2, but also verify they have the exact same number of props. So I can do something like this. Object 1 keys is object.keys object 1. Const object 2 keys is object.keys object 2. And we can do the first verification. If their length is different, it's already false. So if object 1 keys.length different than object 2 keys.length, return false, right? So we handle this scenario. Now we're gonna need to go here and actually verify prop by prop. So I'm gonna say object 1 keys dot for each, and I'm gonna get a key. And I'm gonna say const object 1 prop is object 1 of key, const object 2 prop is object 2 of key, and now I gotta verify those. But if those are primitives, then it's easy, I just do like an equal check. But if those are objects or arrays or maps, I need to verify them. So I'm gonna need here to have various verifications, right? I'm gonna do something if they're both primitives, I'm gonna do something if they're both objects, if they're both arrays, and so on. So let's start with the easiest one, if they are both primitives. So I'm gonna create here another function. Let me minify this. So I'm gonna do function is primitive, and I'm gonna get a value. So how do I know if something is a primitive? Well, it's a primitive if it's not an object and it's not a function, it's type of, and or is null, because type of null is object. So I'm gonna do something like this. Return type of value different than object and type of value different than function, or here I'm gonna need to do, okay, if it's different than object or value is equal to null. So is primitive if it's different than object or is null, because null is a primitive, and if it's different than object, then I need also it to be different than function, right? So I'm gonna do this, and just let me verify type of, I think it's function, right? Type of is primitive should be function, correct. So this is the is primitive value, and let me just test it. Console log is primitive. Let's say 2, true. to 2 as a string. Okay, now let's put an object here, false. Now let's put a function, I should get false. Okay, let's put an array, I get false. Let's put a map, I still get false. Okay, this looks legit. Let's put a date actually also. We have dates. New date, it's false. Okay, this looks good. So going back, I have this isPrimitive function and I can do here a check. If object1 prop, or actually isPrimitive of object1 prop, I'm gonna do, and now I realize I don't wanna do a for each because I wanna return here early. So I'm gonna do for, actually let's do an I. For let I is object1 keys is 0, I is smaller than object1 keys dot length, I plus plus, and object1 prop is gonna be like this. Object I of object I keys of y, and this one is gonna be object2 keys. No, actually it's gonna be the same prop. So this one is key. I'm gonna verify the key on the first one. So the key, I'm gonna take it from here, and this one is gonna be like this. So if the first one is a primitive, I'm gonna assume the second one is as well, and I'm gonna say if this one is a primitive, and I'm gonna say let r equal is object1 prop is equal to object2 prop, object2 prop, and it's actually obj prop. If not are equal, return false. And here at the end, I'm gonna return true. So this is how we're gonna do it. If we find a prop that's not equal, we're gonna return false somewhere. Otherwise, we're gonna return true. And now we can actually test it. Let's say isDeepEqual, and I can say, let's say name Bob. And this one is also gonna say name Bob. And, oh yeah, we need to do a console log. Console log, and we get true. Now also, before I continue, let me just, let's just do here object1 is name Bob. And we're gonna do const, let me make this smaller as well, const object2 is name Bob. And I can say isDeepEqual of object1 object2. Okay, now let's put another prop in object1. Let's say I put age 22. Okay, it's false. Now let's say I put age here, but it's true. It's a boolean. Okay, I still get false. Let's say I put age 22. Okay, so if I have an object, two objects that only contain primitive values, then this function works. But we need to make it work deeply nested. Okay, so let's go to the other if. So if it's not a primitive, then, and otherwise, if I can do here continue, otherwise I can check, okay, let's check with dates, because this one's also easier. And we're gonna do something like this. If object1 prop instance of date, so if this one is a date, then I'm gonna assume that the other one is a date as well. And I'm gonna say let r equal is, and here I'm gonna create a function, r dates equal of object1 prop, object2 prop, and we're gonna do the same thing. So if they're not equal, then we're gonna return false, otherwise we're gonna continue. And of course we need to write this function, right? So I'm gonna say function r dates equal of value 1, value 2, and here also we're gonna check that they are indeed dates. So we're gonna do return value 1 instance of date and value 2 instance of date, and value 1.getTime is equal to value 2.getTime, right? We're gonna check that they represent the same number of milliseconds. So now if we did this correctly, I could go here and I say new date of, let's say 0, and this is gonna be birthday, and here I'm gonna put the birthday in the same date, and it's true. But if I make this one 1, correct, we get false. Okay, this looks good. Now let's move on. So if they're primitives, okay, if they're dates, now what other types we need to check? So they can be object, arrays, maps, dates, or primitives. So those three are the most complex one. And let's actually start with arrays. So I'm gonna say if array.isArray of object1 prop, we're gonna need to do something similar here, right? Are arrays equal, and we're gonna do return false, otherwise continue. Now we're gonna need to write this function. So I'm gonna say function are arrays equal, value 1, value 2. Now we're gonna do the if first. So if not array.isArray of value 1 or not array.isArray of value 2. So if one of them is not an array, return false. But now the idea is, how do we check? We need to check each item. And again, they are arrays, but they may contain objects or maps or so on. So we're going to need to do like a recursive thing. So we're going to need to do something like this. Return value1.every, and here I get a value, or actually let's call it an item, and I get an index. And here I'm going to need to do return, and I'm going to need to check, like, is this one deeply equal with this one? But again, those may be primitives, dates, objects, other arrays, or so on. So I kind of need, this is where the interesting part comes in. I kind of need this function. This is the funny part. I kind of need this one, right? Like this if and so on. So I'm going to take all of this code and I'm going to create a new function we're going to call generic isDeepEqual. It's going to have a value 1, value 2. And this one, let me make it smaller. This one needs to go like this. So return are equal. We're not going to continue. We're just going to return. So if they're primitives, okay, we're going to just return this. If they're arrays, we're going to check are dates equal, and we're going to return are equal. If array, okay, then if they're both arrays, we're going to do the same. So we're going to return are equal. And then we're also going to need to do for maps and objects, and we're going to do it soon. But now here's the interesting part. I'm going to take this one, generic is equal, and I'm going to use it in our array equal. So in this one, right, of item and value 2 of index, right? So I'm going to use it for those, and I'm also going to use it here. Const are equal is generic is deep equal of value of object 1 prop, object 2 prop. And if not are equal, return false. And we get an error that object 1 prop is not defined. Oh yeah, because here we have value 1 and this one is value 2. Right? So again, I was doing some ifs here, but now I realize, hey, for an array, I'm going to need to recursively check the values. So I'm going to need this function. So this is going to be a very generic function that's going to verify the types and is going to check like are dates equal or are array equal or so on and so on. And then those in turn may call this one. So now that we did this and we check for primitive, for dates, and for arrays, right, this one, then I think if everything goes well, I can do an array here. So let's say hobbies is running. This one should be false, true. Let's put it here. Hobbies is running, and I get false. Oh yeah, because the date is 1 here. So let's put the date 0, and we get true. That's correct. Now let's put another hobby here, running and swimming. And we still get true, which, okay, is a problem because we don't check the length here. So if value1.length different than value2.length, then we don't even need to verify. Already return false, right? So this is false. That's good. Now let's say this is actually a nested array. We should be able to check that. So if I put here running, an array inside an array, and then I put here the same one, it's still false, but if I remove this one, it should be true. That's correct. So right now we have support for primitives, dates, and arrays, and nested of those types, but we also need maps and object. So let's actually check for map. If value1 instance of map, we're gonna do the same thing, are maps equal, and we're gonna return this one. And finally, if it's not a primitive, a date, an array, or a map, their objects. And what's the function for objects? Oh, well, oh wait, it's this one. So finally, I'm going to return isDeepEqual of value 1, value 2. Now, we need to do the maps one. So let's create here function rMapsEqual of value 1, value 2. And we're going to need to do something kind of similar here. So we're going to say if value 1 instance of map. So if it's not an instance of map and it's not value 2 an instance of map, then return. Okay, then do maps have a length? So value 1 dot, does it know? Let's say length. No, I think it's size. Okay, we have size. So if they have a different size, then we don't even need to check. Then we need to go through each and check each of their properties. So let's see, do I have here values, which is gonna give me an iterable. So I can say const values. You know what, actually, let's just rename this map 1, map 2. I'm going to say const values 1 is array.from map1.get values. Actually, do I want to get the values? No. Get, not values, sorry. Keys. And this one is a function. So I'm going to get the keys. And I'm gonna say return keys1 dot every key 1, and I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna verify that each of the keys here have the same value. So I'm gonna say return generic isDeepEqual of map1 dot get key 1 and map2 dot get key 1, because I expect to be the same key. So I'm gonna return this. Now, if everything is correct, we should be able to add maps here. So let's just say maybe contacts is going to be a new map of, and here I can do an array. Can I do this? Let's say Alex, and this is the number 0101. And then, so I can't do this. How do I create a map? Let's say mdn map. New map, let's look at the constructor. Constructor, new map. Okay, an array of arrays. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So an array, and here I have the key value pair. So I have Alex with this number, and then let's say I have John with another number, let's say 0202. Now the result is false. Now let's copy this here and we should get true. That's good. Now let's change it for John, 0203. We should get false. Now let's make a nested map. Let's do that. So let's say John is actually an object with phone 0203. It's false. Okay, let's put it here as well. We should get true, which is correct. So this looks good. And I know it's a lot of code because, again, this is a difficult exercise. Let's test it first, and then we're going to go through it. So let's test the solution. Okay, it passes, which is great. Now let's go through it one more time in case you have questions. So I have the isDeepEqual function that's going to get two objects. First, I verify, hey, do they have the same number of keys? Because if one of them has 2 properties and the other one has 3, obviously they're not deep equal, so I'm going to return false. Then I'm going to iterate for each of those keys. I'm going to get the props, right? And again, I only need the key from one object because I expect the value from that key to be the same. And I'm going to take the prop, I mean the value of the key. And then I have this function, generic isDeepEqual, that's going to smartly verify, hey, are they maps? Are they objects? Are they arrays? Do I need to go recursively through them? And so on. If this one is false, I'm going to return false. If I get to the end, I return true. Now I have this generic isDeepEqual that I want to move here. Oh, I cannot edit the code. Okay, that's a shame. I wonder who created this platform in which you cannot edit the code. That guy, man. Okay, so this generic isDeepEqual is going to handle all our use cases. So it's going to verify, hey, do I have primitives, or do I have objects, or do I have arrays, or do I have maps, or do I have dates? So if it's primitive, it's easy. I just do a triple equal. If they're dates, I have this isDeepEqual function that, let's just go, where is it? Here, that verifies, hey, this one is a date, this one is a date, and they have the same value for get time. Okay, that makes sense, that's legit. Now, if they are arrays, I have this isEqual function that is gonna do two things. It's gonna verify that they're arrays, three things actually. It's gonna look at their length, right? It needs to be the same length. And then it's gonna take every item from the first array and it's gonna verify that it's equal to the same item in the second array. And I'm gonna use this generic isDeepEqual. This is where the recursive part comes in. So this one is called, I have two arrays, the array is called this one. If I have nested arrays, again, they're gonna call the arrays and so on. Now, if I have maps, I created an rMapsEqual function that's gonna do a similar thing. It's gonna verify, hey, are both of them maps? Okay, that's good. Do they both have the same size? Yeah, okay, that's good. And then it's gonna check, actually it's gonna take the keys and it's gonna verify that each key from the first one has the same value in the second map as it does in the first map. If all of those match, and again, which function we use to verify? This one, generic isDeep. So we go in, we have maps, then the maps use the same function. Then if we have nested maps or nested objects, they still go to the same function until we reach primitives or dates. And finally, going back to our generic isDeep, if none of those is true, then we know we have objects because that's the only value left from here. So what is the function that verifies that two objects are deeply equal? Well, it's actually the function we need to implement. So we're going to call this one, which again might call generic isDeepEqual and so on. Okay, so this being said, I'm going to close the video here. I hope that makes sense. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!